Anybody think that's not possible? That prices could be that high? That it could be illegal to own silver? It's not science fiction. I mean, I don't think it's not like, some kind of Blade Runner type view of the future. I think it's something that certainly could happen. I mean, the government is going to continue to be a bigger factor in our lives, and they're trying to maintain a phony economy, and they go deeper and deeper into it with the stimulus and what they're doing, and rather than admitting that what they're doing is wrong, they keep trying to double down on their mistakes. And so I think that there's a pretty good probability that we're going to end up with something like that in the future, where it just keeps increasing. And at some point, people are going to wake up to that, and there will be some type of underground, and yeah, it will be considered illegal. The guy points out that he's breaking the law by using those silver circles. The government turns honest people into lawbreakers when the laws themselves are dishonest. And so I think that there's a good chance of that. But I think what we need to do is make sure that more and more people are educated about this possibility, so that maybe we can prevent it. Maybe the next crisis that I think is coming relatively soon, which I think will be worse than 2008, the government was very effective. The media was very effective in blaming that crisis on capitalism, on the free market. We need to make sure that we can counteract that, or beat that, and try to put the blame where it really belongs, on the government. And I think movies like this will help in that respect. A lot of people don't necessarily read, but they watch movies, they watch television. So to the extent that you can present these type of ideas in a media that a lot of people will understand, or will be willing to accept, I think it's a good idea, and hopefully you can make another one. I mean, first you got to get your money back on this one. So.
That's of interest, yes. But yeah. What do you think of the Strategic Housing Reserve? Wouldn't that be a great idea to stabilize housing prices? It seems like, they pay farmers to burn crops.
Yeah, well, I thought you're going to have the blown up houses, trying to destroy some and try to maintain the prices. But yeah, that's one of the government's primary missions right now, is to keep homes as expensive as possible. The original mission of Fannie and Freddie was to help make housing affordable, and of course it achieved the exact opposite. But now that is the stated goal of those agencies, is to maintain high home prices, to stop home prices from falling to the point where they actually would be affordable. They want to make sure that the only way that you can buy a house is to borrow a ton of money to do it. So that's counterproductive. But they're refusing to allow real estate prices to fall, not because they care about homeowners. Homeowners aren't going to be hurt if their house goes down in value. If you have a $500,000 mortgage on a $400,000 house, it doesn't matter if that house goes to $200,000 or $100,000. You're actually better off the lower the house goes. It's the banks, it's the lenders that suffer when their collateral goes down. So it's not about the homeowners, it's all about the banks and keeping them propped up. But the best economic policy would be to let them fail.
I was listening to Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, and he was actually, I think he has a similar view to what you have, but he was saying that the government should be more involved. He was saying that basically the free market was causing the problems. I just was wondering how that would be.
Causing what problems?
Basically, what's going on now. He was basically saying that.
Well, we haven't even had a free market, so it's hard to say how it could have caused the problems. But the problems that we have in the United States result from the government's attempts to manipulate the market. The government doesn't want the free market. The government wants its own idea. The government believes that people should own houses and more people should build houses, and so the government is orchestrating policy to encourage home building and home ownership. The government thinks everybody should go to college, so the government is trying to funnel resources to college, trying to get people to go to college who might be better off not going. The government doesn't like the market outcome. The government is keeping interest rates artificially low because it doesn't want anybody saving. It wants everybody spending. But the free market wouldn't produce this. Market forces would produce something different. But the government is interfering because it doesn't like what the free market is doing. It thinks it has a better idea. But all the problems are the result of that mismanagement, that central planning. the housing and the financial crisis, the housing bubble and the financial crisis were a direct consequence of government manipulation of the markets, government distorting the allocations of resources, the decisions that individuals and companies otherwise would have made absent government incentive. So the government, stacks the deck, and then, we play that rigged game. And then when it ends in disaster, the tendency is to blame the free market, but there was nothing free about the market. And if the markets were free, then we wouldn't have had these problems. I know the Keynesians are going to keep getting it wrong, right? It's impossible for them to get it right. So hopefully, as more of these experiments predictably end in disaster, more people will stop listening to them. It is amazing, though, that they still have so many followers, given the disasters in '08. But now that it appears that things are getting better on the surface to some people, they're somehow being vindicated again. But I'm confident that the next collapse will be worse than the last one, and they'll lose more credibility. But the fact that they still have any at this point is really hard to believe.
Continuing with the story, is there a chance for a sequel? It seems like it's set up that there's going to be something more happening.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely already have a really interesting story laid out. I'm continuing just to kind of read history and think about as far as where to lay things out. And there's drones, and we go into underground silver mines and open pit mines, FEMA camps, and stuff like that. So the part of the goal here is actually to try to tell stories about the kind of stuff that interests people from the liberty movement, and to kind of use these elements, sometimes whether I believe in them or not. There's a lot of chemtrails in the sky there, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of things that are just really interesting stories that Hollywood will never tell. So there's a lot that we're planning. I mean, what is going to be interesting now is we need a message from the market. We've been working on this for 4 years. We're putting it out here. There's a full room tonight, which is awesome, and we just need to kind of keep that rolling, basically, in order to get a message that the market will receive this, and that we can raise money and do this again. So, but I think there's a lot of story to be told here, and a lot of truth to be told, and this is an interesting way to tell it too, especially to younger people. We go to comic conferences and sell and the Fed T-shirts to 13-year-olds. So.
How did you try and calculate the simultaneous economic stimulus and the opposite of stimulus? And what is your frustration with trying to predict how governments affect economies, because governments act so much more unpredictably and irrationally than economies?
Well, that doesn't. The lower interest rates don't necessarily stimulate the economy. What the lower interest rates help do is inflate a bubble in the stock market. I don't think that was stimulative. That did result in some misallocations of resources. It did result in some excess consumption because people perceived that they had much more wealth than they really did. So I think that NASDAQ bubble of the 1990s is what paved the way for the recession in 2001, which unfortunately was cut short by the Fed again and by George Bush, because he did not let the market work out all the imbalances. Instead, we exacerbated those imbalances by the Fed creating a larger housing bubble to replace the busted bubble in the stock market, so that we can continue to consume beyond our means and continue to misallocate our resources. But I don't think that the tax increases from Bill Clinton had anything to do with whatever prosperity people believe was enjoyed. I think it would have happened without those tax increases. I think it was mainly what the Fed was doing. And one of the things that they did do, though, which I think helped, but I think helped set a bad precedent, was they did concentrate on longer term interest rates. And while the Federal Reserve was not doing what they're doing today, we didn't have QE. The Fed wasn't a big buyer of long-term government bonds. Under Rubin, who was Secretary of the Treasury, the federal government stopped selling 30-year bonds and began to finance the debt using shorter maturities. And in so doing, they were able to bring down the cost of servicing the debt. and that helped bring the budget into balance, at least on paper, not counting, some of the other, off-budget items, because we reduced our debt service, but we also exposed the taxpayers to greater risk were interest rates to rise, and those risks now are extreme. In fact, I read today that the projected interest on the national debt for this year, interest payments are only going to be $228 billion, which is the same that we paid interest on the national debt in 1980 when the national debt was $2.5 trillion. So even though the national debt is $16.5 trillion, because of the gift from the Fed, we're only spending $228 billion on interest. But if interest rates were to rise to this, to the same level of 1980, in 1980 that we were paying 8.5% on the national debt. If we had to pay 8.5% today, interest payments on the debt would be $1.5 trillion. Now, where would the government get that money? The Fed would have to print it, and we'd be looking at the silver circle. So it's only a question of time. I mean, we're living literally on borrowed time. I mean, prices are rising, right? I mean, gasoline prices are the highest they've been for this time of year, and I think they're going to keep going higher. Food prices are going up. Prices for lots of things are going up. In fact, I just read this article that referenced that health insurance premiums are set to go up from 50 to 120% next year. I mean, these are huge, huge increases.
Yeah, I guess I should say, so when does gold and silver trail that? You're right, I agree. But
well, a lot of, gold, you have to remember, gold's gone from under 300 a decade ago to almost 2,000. It's pulled back. Now it's around 1,600. But over the last decade, it's gone up a lot. And so, you don't necessarily expect it to always go up. I think it's gone sideways for the last couple of years. And I think it's, building a base for another more spectacular rise just because it hasn't, gone up during that period of time. And I think a lot of the price of gold and, and even the mining stocks, if you look there, but it reflects the perception of what inflation is going to be. And if you have a lot of people that don't believe there's going to be inflation, then they don't necessarily feel that they have to buy gold. And in fact, you have a lot of people who bought gold a year or two ago thinking that it was just going to keep going up because it had gone up so much. They're losing patience because they're more short-term traders, so they're looking to get out. And I think now that stocks are making new highs, at least the Dow is making new nominal highs, people who might have been reluctant to buy stocks are now jumping in. Maybe they're selling their gold because they want to be where the action is. It was in gold, now it's in stocks. It's kind of like when you're in traffic and you're in a slow lane and you see the other lane is moving quicker, so you want to get into it. But sometimes when you do that, the lane you move into becomes a slow lane and the lane you were in picks up. But I think that's going to happen. I think some of the weaker players, the weaker hands are getting out of the market. And you have to remember that, the big money, the people that really control a lot of other people's money really don't believe this. I mean, they really drank the Kool-Aid, and they believe the Fed, they believe the central banks, they believe the government. And so, and they want to be optimistic. They want to think everything is going to be okay. And so they don't think there's any reason to buy gold. And, they're wrong. There's trillions of reasons to buy gold. But I think they're going to figure it out. But in the meantime, just take advantage if you're accumulating gold or silver to buy it, on these dips and take advantage of the fact that because if gold had gone up a lot more, then it would be more expensive for us to buy it. I would rather see us, go back to a gold standard, and that doesn't mean that everybody has to walk around with gold coins in their pocket. I mean, certainly in today's age, it's a lot easier and a lot simpler to use debit cards or credit cards. But ultimately, if the monetary system is anchored in gold, and there's gold somewhere, that you can get if you want to, it doesn't mean that you have to carry it around. I mean, like with my offshore bank, where people can store their gold with me and then get a MasterCard and have access to their gold bullion by swiping their MasterCard. That's gold money. Even though they're not using the cash, they're using plastic. There's gold behind it. And I think that would make for a much more stable monetary system. And I think that, with the technology that we have today, I think a gold standard would work a lot better now than it did, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, when you didn't have that, and you actually had to, have the physical gold with you.
So in the movie, the rebels rely on an alternative currency that is accepted by the general people, generally people in the world who don't even know who produces it. In the past few days, we've seen a huge rise in the world's largest alternative currency, Bitcoin. Can you talk a little bit about the role of alternative currencies in combating the Federal Reserve?
You don't really have to know who makes your silver circles, as long as you believe there's an ounce of silver there. Who's minting them really is immaterial. People are accepting them because of the scarcity and the rarity and the physical properties inherent in the silver. And that's a viable alternative. Although also in the movie there are other currencies. People could look at the RMB. And I think that's popular. In fact, maybe I should have brought one with me. But we've just started selling at my precious metals company, which is here in the city, Europe Pacific Precious Metals, these new bars. They're made from a Swiss mint, but each bar is the size of a credit card. Literally, it's the size of a American Express card, a Visa card, and it's 50 grams of gold in per bar, which is about 1.6 ounces. So it's worth about $2,500 in melt value, and it's like a chocolate bar in that you can break it into 50 equal 1 gram pieces. And the whole idea behind the bar is that you put it in your wallet like a credit card, and if we do get to a situation like Silver Circle, where various merchants prefer to be paid in real money, you can simply break off a little piece. Each piece right now is worth $50, and which means you could fill up your car with gasoline with a little piece, and in the future, if gasoline is as expensive as it was in this movie, you could probably still buy the tank with that same little piece of gold, but not if you're holding on to dollars. As far as what's going to happen with a digital alternative such as Bitcoin, I have no idea. I mean, the problem I have with Bitcoin is that it doesn't have intrinsic value like gold or silver. The only value it possesses is your belief that it will be scarce and that other people will accept it. So in that respect, in some ways it's superior to a fiat currency. But of course, the thing with a fiat currency is at least that it's legal tender and that some government will accept it in payment of taxes. And so you don't have that with something like a Bitcoin. Now, when I first heard about Bitcoins, you could buy them for $2, and now they're like $70. So I mean, that's pretty volatile too. Anything that can go from 2 to 70 can go from 70 to 2. So I don't know, with that kind of volatility, how it would function as a medium of exchange. But I did read just the other day that the governments are now cracking down. The U.S. government is going to be imposing the same requirements on people who transact in Bitcoins as any bank, which is AML, money laundering, reporting, record keeping, which might reduce the appeal for some people of transacting. We'll see how it affects the exchange rate of the Bitcoin. But there's still a difference to me between something real. One of the problems I have with fiat money is that it's just a piece of paper. It has no actual value other than the fact that governments and people will accept it. But you have no idea how many you're gonna need, right? I mean, yes, so you get a mass inflation, but gold, silver, since it has intrinsic value, and since it is scarce and very difficult to produce, it's a more reliable store of value, and you don't have to hope that somebody will accept it. You know that they'll accept it. They've accepted it for thousands of years, and as I said, I think they'll accept it. If we could go visit another planet, assuming there was life there, if we brought some gold with us, we could probably buy stuff. Just like if aliens came down here, if they brought gold, they could buy stuff too. We take But if we took our dollar bills to some other planet, we probably wouldn't be able to get anything. With what's going on now, if governments do not provide a stable currency, then the markets will seek out alternatives. I mean, that's what Bitcoin is. I mean, people who like it are attracted to it because they're looking for an alternative. I think gold and silver are a better alternative, and I think more people will ultimately put their trust there. But the free market is going to win. And when people wake up to the realization that governments are now deliberately creating inflation. I mean, for a while, governments pretended that they were going to, fight inflation, that they were going to, target price stability and stable money. Now they're not doing that anymore. Now they're saying that we need inflation. Prices must rise 2 or 3% a year, maybe more. And what they're saying is that if you save our currency, you will lose. You are going to lose value, and more people will say, well, I don't want to lose 2 or 3 or 4% of the value of my savings every single year. So I'm going to seek out an alternative. And that's what I think. I think that the market forces will ultimately force governments to provide a more stable currency. Because if nobody wants the currencies that the governments are creating, then they'll collapse in value. The government needs demand for their currency, but if nobody wants it, and if then people start refusing to accept it, or they don't sell products, they demand payment in some alternative, then the systems will collapse. And the governments can try to make it illegal and ban it, but it doesn't matter. Lots of things are illegal, right? And people still do them anyway. They just get away with it because the government, it's not a police state. The government can't have a cop in everybody's house making sure they're abiding by all these laws.
So just one other comment on that. The only way that you would get a one world currency is if you outlawed all of the others. And I think the way out of this problem is to actually have a competing currency kind of situation and let people in Gresham's law and reverse Gresham's law figure out what currencies work for people and let the other ones die a natural death.